0641 local time. Iranian coastal radar station Bandar Abbas. The radar operator is staring at his screen. The picture makes no sense. Two surface contacts inside the shipping lane, commercial, cargo profile, moving south at 12 knots, heading straight for the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait, Iran, closed 5 days ago. The Strait, nothing has been allowed to transit. He calls it up the chain. The duty officer pulls every sensor available, coastal radar, air search radar, the shore-based ELINT array that has been catching every American transmission for 3 weeks. Nothing. No carrier, no destroyer formation, no air wing pushing in from the south. Two merchant ships moving through a closed waterway with no visible escort. That is impossible. Then the underwater sensors light up, and the picture gets worse. Something is moving below the surface, not a submarine. Too small, too quiet, multiple contacts, spread across a corridor 21 miles long. The mines Iran seeded into that water for 98 days are being cleared in real time by something the IRGC has no acoustic signature for. The duty officer reaches for the radio to scramble fast attack craft. That's when the Apaches show up. The first IRGC small boat leaves Bandar Abbas at 0644. 6 minutes later, it is debris. The second boat goes 30 seconds after that. The third turns to run and never makes it. 6 fast attack boats, 11 minutes. None of them get within 4 miles of the merchant convoy. In Tampa, Florida, they already have a name for what just happened. The IRGC is about to spend the rest of the day learning what that name means. One burned hull at a time. 1100 hours Eastern. CENTCOM headquarters, MacDill Air Force Base. Admiral Brad Cooper steps to the briefing podium. Project Freedom is now operational. Guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, multi-domain unmanned platforms under the sea, on the sea, and from the air. 15,000 service members. That is one piece of the answer. There are 2 more, and when all 3 are on the table, you will understand why Iran's commanders watch their own coastline go dark in real time. Why the IRGC's 98-day blockade collapsed in a single morning, and why one detail buried in Cooper's briefing, 3 words almost no one caught, proves this isn't a one-time operation. This is a doctrine, and Iran is the test case. The Strait and what Iran built. To understand why Iran's commanders had no answer that morning, you need to understand what they thought they had locked down. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Every tanker leaving Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, it transits here. No bypass, no alternative. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through this water every single day. On February 28th, Iran closed it. And on the day Project Freedom launched, 2,000 commercial vessels were trapped behind that closure. Oil tankers, gas carriers, bulk haulers, cruise liners, roughly 20,000 seafarers from 87 different countries, running low on food, running low on fuel, running low on water. The International Maritime Organization said there was no precedent for it, not in the modern age. That was the lever Iran had been building for 40 years.
Because of the crisis, because of the conflict, it's not safe for the ships to transit through these corridors. And this is what is actually stopping this. But legally speaking, in accordance to international law, no countries have the right to prohibit the right of innocent passage or the freedom of navigation through international straits that are used for international transit.
And by April 28th, when the IRGC reclosed the strait and announced, quote, that the waterway would not be managed by Trump's delusional posts, the architecture supporting that lever was the most refined version of asymmetric naval doctrine ever fielded. 3 layers. Layer 1, sea mines. Iranian-manufactured Maham 3 and Maham 7 limpet mines. Magnetic attachment, contact or timer detonation, small enough to deploy from a fast boat at night with no radar signature. Enough mines scattered across a choke point, and every captain transiting that water is making a decision, not about speed or fuel, but about whether his ship comes out the other side intact. Layer 2, fast attack craft. PACAP 2 hulls, 42 knots, each carrying a Nasser 1 anti-ship missile with 35 kilometers of range. The IRGC has spent 4 decades building swarm tactics around them. Not one boat threatening one ship. 12 boats threatening 12 ships at once, each tucked into a commercial radar return where the only weapon precise enough to engage is a hellfire from a helicopter that hasn't arrived yet. Layer 3, this shore-based anti-ship missiles hidden inside hardened bunkers, buried 60 feet into the rock along Iran's southern coast, ready to reach anything moving through that water the moment the order came down. Mines, swarms, coastal missiles, Iran called the doctrine asymmetric deterrence. The IRGC had been refining it since the 1980s tanker war, when a single Iranian mine nearly sank the USS Samuel B. Roberts, and the world learned exactly how much damage a contested choke point could do to global oil prices. 38 years of refinement after that, 38 years of plugging gaps. By May 1st, the U.S. had degraded Layer 3 significantly. Multiple GBU-72 strikes through the rock above the missile bunkers. CENTCOM confirmed the inventory was substantially reduced, but the mines were still in the water. The fast attack boats were still running. 2/3 of Iran's blockade was still active, still capable of keeping 2,000 commercial vessels and 20,000 stranded crew locked inside the Persian Gulf indefinitely. Iran still had a play. 3 days later, that play ran into something its doctrine never modeled. The ghost weapon. Reveal, Sunday, May 3rd, 1900 hours Eastern. Truth Social. The President posts. Project Freedom, a humanitarian operation to free up the vessels and crews stranded in the Gulf. By Monday morning, the U.S. military has it operational, and what the IRGC sees in the first 6 hours is not an escort convoy. It is not a freedom of navigation patrol. It is not anything in their doctrine. It is a corridor, a 21-mile corridor cleared through water Iran believed it controlled. Cleared by a combination of capabilities Iran has no integrated counter for. 3 platforms, 3 domains, operating simultaneously, none of them showing up on a single Iranian sensor as a single threat. That is the ghost weapon. Domain 1, under the sea, unmanned underwater vehicles. The specific systems are not publicly disclosed. That is deliberate. What CENTCOM does say is this, quote, exquisite technology, low observable capability, used over the preceding weeks to clear mines and create a free lane that's not obstructed in any way, shape, or form through the strait, end quote. Translate that. Autonomous underwater drones operating below the acoustic threshold of Iranian coastal sonar, hunting Maham mines one at a time, mapping the seafloor, identifying every device Iran put in the water for 98 days, neutralizing them on a schedule the IRGC has no visibility into. Iran's mine doctrine assumed mines stayed in the water until ships hit them. The unmanned underwater layer rewrote that assumption. The mines were being cleared while Iranian commanders still believed they were active. Layer 1 of Iran's blockade, off the board, quietly, before Project Freedom launched. Domain 2, on the sea, unmanned surface vessels, operating in the corridor, networked, pushing forward of the destroyer screen, building a picture of every IRGC fastboat leaving Bandar Abbas and Bandar-e Jask the moment its engines come online. The PKAP 2 swarm doctrine assumes the swarm gets close before the response forms, 12 boats accelerating from 12 different bearings, some decoy, some real. The defender has to sort the threat before any individual hull gets inside missile range. The unmanned surface layer collapses that timeline. Every IRGC boat is tracked from departure. Every bearing is fed in real time to the AH-64 Apaches and MH-60 Seahawks already pre-positioned over the corridor. By the time the swarm forms, the targeting solution is already built. 6 IRGC small boats engaged Project Freedom on day 1, all 6 destroyed. None of them got within 4 miles of a merchant ship. Layer 2 of Iran's blockade, defeated in real time, while Iranian commanders were still issuing the launch order. Domain 3, from the air. This is where the architecture stops being a network of platforms and becomes something different. Over 100 aircraft, a 10 Thunderbolts, F-15S, F-16, SF/A, 18 Super Hornets, F-35 Lightning IIs, EA-18G, Growlers jamming Iranian radar in the moments the corridor is most exposed. RC-135 rivet joints, listening to every IRGC transmission and feeding the picture forward. KC-46 and KC-135 tankers keeping the umbrella airborne for hours at a time. And above all of them, unmanned aerial systems, ISR strike capable, building the air picture before any manned platform enters the threat ring. The F-35 has a radar cross-section the size of a marble. The Growler suppresses every Iranian frequency the IRGC has fielded. The A-10 hunts watercraft at 200 feet in the radar shadow. The Apache works the rotary wing band that swarm doctrine assumed belonged to Iran. The unmanned aerial layer fills the gaps between all of them. Iran's coastal radar was scanning for fast movers at altitude. The corridor's threats were operating below their radar horizon, above their radar ceiling, and inside their decision cycle simultaneously. There was no sequence to the response. All three layers, under, on, and above, operating at the same time. Every move Iran made to counter one platform exposed it to another. Fast boats accelerating away from the unmanned surface vessels went into Apache targeting solutions. Drones launched to distract the destroyer screen went into Growler jamming and F-35 intercepts. Coastal radar operators scanning for the threat they recognized never looked at the threat they didn't. Every countermeasure Iran had was calibrated for a single threat profile. The Ghost weapon had three, simultaneously. No single radar signature, no single frequency to jam, no single domain to defend against. Layer 1 neutralized below the surface. Layer 2 neutralized on the surface. Layer 3 neutralized weeks earlier from above. The blockade Iran spent 40 years building was reduced to a Truth Social post and a single Monday morning of operations. The numbers and the paradox, May 4th, end of day 1. 2 U.S.-flagged merchant vessels have transited the strait under Project Freedom protection, the first commercial transit since Iran's reclosure on April 28th. Iran has fired multiple cruise missiles, multiple drones, 6 small boats. Her Admiral Cooper, quote, "Every single threat defeated through the clinical application of defensive munitions," end quote. 0 U.S. casualties, 0 merchant vessel casualties. Trump's response is direct. Iran will be, quote, "blown off the face of the earth," end quote, if it attacks U.S. vessels carrying out Project Freedom.
Do we want to go and just blast the hell out of them and finish him forever, or do we want to try and make a deal? I mean, those are the options.
Do you want to go blast the hell out of him?
I'd
and
prefer
finish him
not.
forever?
On a human basis, I'd prefer not, but that's the option. Do we want to go in there heavy and just blast them away, or do we want to do something? They're a very disjointed unitship, as you can understand, Peter, very disjointed.
Iran responds the same day by launching new missile and drone attacks on the UAE. Project Freedom keeps moving. This is where the numbers stop being abstract and start telling you what happened. 15,000 U.S. service members committed to a single 21-mile passage, over 100 aircraft on the umbrella, 12 U.S. destroyers in the Middle East, fewer than the 1980s tanker war required for traditional escort. Because Project Freedom isn't traditional escort, it is a corridor with multi-domain coverage replacing one-on-one ship escort entirely. 2,000 commercial vessels still trapped in the Gulf at sunrise on May 4th. 20,000 seafarers from 87 countries running out of food, fuel, and water. The International Maritime Organization saying there is no precedent for it in the modern age. Project Freedom is the operation that decides whether those people get home. And then there is the detail almost no one covered. Cooper used a phrase in the May 4th briefing. 3 words: Maritime Forces Coalition. The State Department, separately, has been working on an architecture under that name for weeks. Per the Wall Street Journal and Reuters reporting, the Maritime Forces Coalition is being established as a post-conflict maritime security architecture for the Middle East, long-term energy security, protecting critical maritime infrastructure, maintaining navigational rights and freedoms in vital sea lanes. Read that carefully. Project Freedom is not a one-time operation, it is the prototype. The first live test of a permanent U.S.-led maritime coalition designed to replace exactly the kind of leverage Iran tried to build for 40 years. What collapsed on May 4th was not just the blockade, it was the underlying theory of asymmetric deterrence, that a regional power can hold a chokepoint hostage against a global one. The Ghost weapon proved that theory wrong in real time on day 1 of execution. And the paradox is this: the capabilities that did it, the unmanned underwater vehicles, the autonomous surface platforms, the networked aerial drones, these are the systems the U.S. Navy has been quietly funding for 15 years against Pacific Command requirements, not Middle East requirements, Pacific. The systems were built to operate inside Chinese sensor coverage in the South China Sea. They got their first integrated combat test against Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. China is watching, so is every other regional power that has built a strategy around denying a choke point to U.S. naval power. The doctrine they were planning against doesn't exist anymore. The cost Project Freedom is not free. Per analysts at the Hudson Institute and Breaking Defense, the operation puts U.S. Navy assets into direct fire range of Iranian shore-based anti-ship cruise missiles for the first time. The blockade architecture before Project Freedom kept American capital ships outside that envelope. The corridor model puts destroyers inside it: the USS Pinckney, the USS Milius, Arleigh Burke class, Aegis-equipped, ballistic missile defense capable, operating in waters where every IRGC anti-ship missile the U.S. hasn't yet destroyed is calibrated specifically for them. The carriers Ford and Lincoln are facing deployment extensions. Maintenance periods will be late. Per analyst Brian Clark, cascading delays at Norfolk Naval Shipyard and Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Pacific readiness affected. Atlantic readiness affected. The aircraft umbrella is consuming flight hours that should be going to Pacific deterrence requirements. Defensive missile inventory is being expended at a rate that, sustained indefinitely, is not sustainable. Iran knows it. Per Breaking Defense analysis, Iran's strategy is not to defeat Project Freedom in a single engagement. The strategy is to force the U.S. to keep firing defensive munitions until the inventory drains and the political will erodes. The IRGC Navy has been hit hard, but it retains enough fast attack craft, naval mines, missiles, drones, and tactical air defenses to credibly threaten U.S. forces inside the new threat envelope. Per CNN, to actually stop the operation, Iran would have to directly confront the U.S. Navy, something it has not done to date. Iran's bet: the U.S. cannot sustain Project Freedom forever. Cooper's own words at the May 4th briefing tell you what kind of operation this is. Quote, "The president wants action. He doesn't want to sit still. He wants pressure. He wants a deal." End quote. Project Freedom is a kinetic operation engineered to create diplomatic pressure. The corridor stays open until Iran agrees to terms, or until the cost of holding it open exceeds the strategic value of holding it open, whichever comes first, resolution and forward threat. By the end of day 1, Iran's blockade architecture is measurably broken. 2 merchant vessels through the corridor, 6 IRGC fast boats destroyed, multiple cruise missiles, drones, and small craft defeated with 0 U.S. casualties. The mines are not fully cleared, that work continues, but the strait is no longer closed. 2,000 vessels are still inside the Gulf. The transit pace from day 1 will not get them all home in days. It will take weeks, maybe months, but there is a corridor now. There wasn't one a week ago. The Maritime Forces Coalition is being announced piece by piece. 22 nations have already signed on to elements of safe passage support. The Royal Navy is leading mine clearance work on the European side of the architecture. What started as a humanitarian operation to free stranded seafarers is becoming the foundation for a permanent multinational maritime presence in the Gulf. That is the doctrinal shift. That is what May 4th actually was. Now, the question nobody is asking: the systems that made Project Freedom work, the unmanned underwater vehicles, the autonomous surface platforms, the networked aerial drones, these are not going back into peacetime storage. They have been combat tested. The doctrine has been proven. Every regional power that built a strategy around denying a choke point to American naval power is rewriting that strategy starting now. China is watching the Strait of Hormuz and seeing the South China Sea. Russia is watching and seeing the Baltic. North Korea is watching and seeing the Yellow Sea. The Ghost weapon worked once. The next theater is already being calibrated for it. And Iran's commanders, sitting in Bandar Abbas at the end of May 4th, are looking at a coastline that no longer functions as a fortress. The 40-year strategy is over. What replaces it does not exist yet. The IRGC will spend the next year trying to build a counter to a doctrine they only fully encountered at sunrise on a Monday morning. They will not have time. Iran has fought drones. Iran has fought destroyers. Iran has fought stealth jets. Iran has never fought all three at once. Now they are.